we do now all of the games. As we get to the weeknight, Army headed over to East Carolina to take on the Pirates. It was a rough start to the week, to be quite honest with you. We had two games here on the weeknight that we got wrong. We thought Army, they beat Kansas State. We thought that was going to be a nice bounce back, get the Black Knights going. After losing to Tarleton State at home, they played a really tight game against North Texas last week. Almost had that comeback come through, but came up short against the Mean Green. And it was a little bit of a bummer. This one, we went against the grain. East Carolina was the favorite. We're like, okay, Army, come on, let's take the gamble here. But it did not go off so well. I think it was turnovers. Also, East Carolina's offense was just playing really good there in the first half, and that's all she wrote. I'm pretty sure it was that scoreline, if I'm not mistaken. I might have. Yeah, okay, so it was 28-6. It wasn't 28-3, but still, 3-point difference isn't that much far off. Regardless, Army disappoints us. Virginia played Florida State. We just talked about that game in the top 25 section. Very happy to see Virginia beat Florida State because I don't really like Florida State fans. Even though we got that wrong, I'm okay with it. As we continue and see one I got right. That was TCU heading down to Tempe, playing Arizona State. Unfortunately, TCU, I think in the AP were ranked, but on the road here, we're not favorites. The Sun Devils, at least the last time I checked, was 2.5-point favorites to win this, and well, they covered 27-24. Sun Devils played better, I think, in that first half. TCU kind of getting back into it, and I think took the lead over again, if I can remember that right. But there's still a kicking issue that Arizona State just has. I don't know when that's going to be fixed because it's been kind of plaguing them since last year when Kenny Dillingham had like open tryouts, and it looked like that didn't even work, which is kind of funny. Regardless, Arizona State proves us right, 27-24 there against the Horned Frogs, and hand Sunny Dykes and TCU their first loss of the season. I think it's also a good thing that Arizona State getting back into form. You know, a nice win against Texas State, who's a very solid team, handing the Bobcats their first loss of the season. They beat Baylor last week also with a field goal difference. And then you beat another undefeated team here in TCU as they continue to roll after that loss to Mississippi State, which wasn't as bad as I think a lot of people originally thought it was going to be. Houston headed over to Corvallis to play Oregon State. The Cougars, massive comeback there. They do not cover. They were minus 13-point favorites. But man, it did not look like the Cougars were going to win this game. This went to also, if I'm not mistaken, overtime. Just like the Virginia-Florida State game. And it was, again, a field goal difference. I'm trying to remember. I think it was an interception for Houston, which then set up that field goal difference. That's all they really needed to win this game. And unfortunately, Oregon State continues to be winless here in 2025, and Houston continues to be undefeated. As we get into the morning games, or noon, depending on where you are in the country, Georgia Tech goes to overtime with Wake Forest, 30-29. I didn't even write the line for this game because I thought Georgia Tech was going to just completely outlast the Demon Deacons. They didn't. Had to go to overtime to beat them in that comeback win there on the road. USC, Illinois, we got that one right. Again, we talked about that in the top 25 section. We went against the grain and also got it right there in Champaign. Arkansas hosted Notre Dame there in Fayetteville and got their hog cheeks clapped 56-13. This game was over by halftime. I think it was 42-13. Results in Sam Pittman being the fourth head coach fired already this season. as this morning that news broke that the Razorbacks AD or whoever makes that decision part ways again with Pittman, and good old Petrino, the former head coach of Arkansas back in the day, will be the interim going forward. As again, Notre Dame wins 56-13. Irish get another SEC win on the road, but does it really mean much when it's Arkansas? Here we go. Minnesota hosted Rutgers. This was one of the best games this past weekend. A nice back and forth, not as highly, I guess, profiled going into the weekend, but there was a nice storyline surrounding it as Rutgers quarterback Kelly McManus, the former Minnesota Gopher, comes to his former program and almost gets the win there. Rutgers were off to a decent start, but Minnesota just responded multiple times and they win 31-28. This game didn't end with a missed field goal because there was some time still left on the clock, but Rutgers had a chance to send it to overtime, but missed that field goal. It was very similar to North Carolina versus Minnesota last season, as the Golden Gophers, I believe, get their first Big Ten win there. We have Duke heading over to Syracuse, played in that nice dome. They beat the Orange 38-3, sorry. Duke covered there, minus 5.5 point favorites. Syracuse, unfortunately, without their starting quarterback, Steve Angeli, who's out with a season-long injury. And that's kind of why we saw this score result. Obviously, Syracuse beat Clemson last week. A lot of people would be like, oh, well, they beat Clemson. You got to go with them over Duke at home. But when you're without that quarterback, that kind of got you that win and made it actually competitive against Tennessee. Yeah, you're going to have a bad time. And that's why they lose 38-3 to the Blue Devils. Louisville. This was another comeback win against Pitt there at Heinz Field. 34-27. Slow start for the Cardinals, but ultimately they prevail over Pitt. They're minus 4.5 point favorites. They cover. Just was a little disappointed. We've been seeing too many slow starts from Louisville, and that should not be expected because they had loaded up like they have been doing in the off seasons from the transfer portal, and doing all right there also with the recruiting. But yeah, it's just a little surprising to see them struggle the last couple of weeks. I know against Bowling Green, it was a bit of a slow start, but they blew out the Falcons eventually. But the week before, I think it was the game against James Madison. I know it's James Madison, but still, it's Louisville. You should be handling business. But at least, again, they get the job done. They continue to be undefeated as they get a nice big ACC win on the road. Cincinnati headed to Lawrence to take on the Kansas Jayhawks. Bearcats win 37-34. Another exciting game as Kansas looked like they had the game-winning drive there at the end to solidify that comeback win against Cincinnati. But the Bearcats respond with a touchdown of their own to ultimately win 37-34. It's unfortunate for the Jayhawks as it looked like they were really bouncing back again since that Missouri loss. But they lose to Cincinnati and now have two losses in that column. And Cincinnati goes 3-1 after this. Kansas State, actually we got both the games in Kansas wrong, hosted Central Florida and beat the Knights 34-20. Looks like the Wildcats have bounced back. We went with UCF because of the trend that Dublin teams, or the teams that play in Dublin that lose, usually have a bad season. We were kind of going with that because, again, Kansas State almost lost to North Dakota. They lost to Army. They just haven't been playing consistent. And yeah, that's why we went with UCF. Unfortunately, we got it wrong. It is what it is. Let's keep moving to North Texas versus South Alabama. This game, North Texas technically covered, but I was a little surprised that South Alabama put up a fight. 36-22. I think it was 32-22, or it might have been 28-22, something around there. But North Texas ultimately wins. South Alabama, just a team. Obviously, they're not winning, but they're not going away very easily as well. But again, the Mean Green cover there. Next up, we got Ohio hosting Bowling Green. A game we got right, and very similar to the one that we just talked about. Very surprised to see Bowling Green hold on for so long. I don't think Ohio pulled away until the second half. And then again, they won 35-20 there. Vanderbilt versus Utah State. A game that didn't start off so well for the Commodores, but ultimately they pull away 55-35 against the Aggies. Central Michigan versus Eastern Michigan. Too many of these games where I'm just like, what? Eastern Michigan's so bad. I know they beat UL Lafayette last week at home with a field goal, but Central Michigan, they've been just playing better football, as this was the 103rd meeting between the two. But the Chippewas win 24-13. They more than covered that 5.5 point line set going into this game. Just thought Central Michigan would have won by a couple more possessions, to be quite honest with you. The final game on the slide is James Madison hosting Georgia Southern. The Dukes win 35-17, or not 17, 10. I'm looking at the line going into this game. The Dukes were favored by 17 points. They more than covered there. A little bit of a slow start, but again, they win. I think they had a nice kickoff return, which kind of gave them that momentum there at home to ultimately run away with this. Again, 35-10. As this is the slide there for the morning or noon, depending on where you are. Give us a thumbs up if any of these teams is a program that you support. Let us also know which of these teams in the comments or in the chat who you're rooting for. As we get into now the noon or early afternoon games, we got UL Monroe hosting Arkansas State. They win 28-16 over the Red Wolves. Minus 2.5 point favorites for the Warhawks, so it looked like it was going to be a close game, and ended up not being that. 2 possession win for the Warhawks there. Again, 28-16. A game that we talked about in the top 25 section, Ohio State versus UW. Buckeyes win 24-6. Buckeyes continue to win, beat an undefeated team. I think maybe they might have a chance to play. No, I think the rest of the schedule, they don't play another undefeated team at all, actually. If I'm not mistaken. Maybe, no, they don't play Indiana this year. I was thinking of Illinois. Regardless, they hand UW their first L of the season. LSU versus Ole Miss, a game that we did an in-depth review of and actually talked about it 2 times before this. They win 24-19 there at home and continue that home winning streak against the Bayou Bengals. Texas A&M versus Auburn, 16-10. Auburn doing a decent job for themselves, but unfortunately, offensive line troubles there in protecting Jackson Arnold. But at least the defense not giving up too many points, as again the Aggies win 16-10. Indiana on the road there in Iowa City against the Hawkeyes, 20-15. A little bit of interesting scoreline. Again, this game ended with a safety, and that's why it ended up being 20-15. If you're a conspiracy theorist, let me know in the comments down below, because a lot of people are talking about conspiracies because of the line set. I think it was -7 or -7.5, depending on when you got in it. A lot of people that are in the betting game were very disappointed with that. UCLA headed over to Northwestern. Probably the best game we've seen the Bruins have as it's I believe the first game since the departure of the Sean Foster, the head coach of the Bruins going into 2025. He was fired along with Brent Pry from Virginia Tech a couple weeks ago. But coming back from that bye week, they have a decent performance there on the road, but lose 17-14. This was kind of the game that UCLA probably is only going to win. For the rest of the season, we might see them go 0-12, which is obviously a bad look since they moved to the Big Ten. We continue to another former Pac-12 school, but winning on the road. That is Cal beating Boston College 28-24. We went kind of also with the line set. The Eagles were favored by 6.5 points over the Berkeley Bears. But Cal bounced back after not scoring a single point against San Diego State last week. They score again 28 here. Is a little bit of a surprise. But Boston College has been pretty bad. And maybe I should stop picking them, as they've been letting us down here in 2025 quite a bit already. Baylor hosted... Oh no, they went down to Stillwater to play Oklahoma State, who's also going through, unfortunately, some coaching woes. Earlier this week on Tuesday, they let go of the second longest tenured head coach, and that was Mike Gundy. And, well, they continue the trend of losing 45-27, which was also pretty interesting. It was minus 20.5 points for Baylor. They don't actually cover. Bummer deal if you got in on that, because actually I thought they would have been able to. But it is what it is. Baylor continues to at least bounce back, get their first, I believe, Big 12 win of the season. They have Kansas State, I believe, this upcoming week. Utah went down to Morgantown. Another one we talked in the top 25 section. The Utes blow out the Mountaineers 48-14 there. UConn headed over to Buffalo. They beat the Bulls 20-17. I think the line in the beginning of the week was 3 points for the Huskies. It moved up to 4.5, so they do not cover. This was one of the games I was actually really worried about not getting right, just because of UConn and their early season woes. They lost 2 games already in overtime to Syracuse and Delaware. So we're like, oh man, they're going to play another Northeast school and possibly lose on the road. But they get the job done again against the Bulls, 20-17. A low scoring one over here in Illinois, and that's San Diego State playing the Huskies of Northern Illinois. Aztecs cover. It was 2.5 point favorites going into this game, 6-3. Not a lot of scoring there, a lot of defense, as they have a decent winning streak going since shutting out Cal last week now. Navy host Rice this past weekend, 21-13. The Midshipmen continue to win. They are one of the many teams undefeated in the American. And Rice there, obviously, they did not disappoint us by giving the Midshipmen their first L of the season. Toledo hosted Akron. They beat the Zips 45-3. The line was set at 20.5 in the beginning of the week. It moved up to 21. They more than covered. If I'm not mistaken, when we went into this week talking about that game and we mentioned those lines, I was like, that might be one for sure that actually gets covered. I think the Missouri UMass one was the other one. We technically were off by a couple points there, but this one, we know how bad the Zips are. And we know also Toledo wanted to bounce back after losing, I think it was last week. I'm trying to remember who they lost in the MAC to. I think it was Bowling Green, if I'm not mistaken. Oh, Western Michigan. Western Michigan. I was thinking of a Michigan school for some reason, and got it right. So they bounced back after losing to Western Michigan in their MAC opener. They get their first MAC win of the season there against the Zips at home. Miami of Ohio, I believe this was the only shutout here in week 5. I know they played an FCS school, and I'm just double checking the rest of the scores on another page. And yes, the only shutout this weekend, 38-0 there. They played Lindenwood. That was the only FCS team to play an FBF program. And we will probably see less and less of them, maybe even none, for the next couple of weeks. Not until the end of the season, where we'll see like an SEC team have one of those cupcakes later down the line. New Mexico hosted New Mexico State there in Albuquerque for the 115th Rio Grande rivalry game. The Lobos were favored by 14 points. They definitely cover and win 38-20. Yeah, nothing much. I don't really have much there to say after that because didn't get to tune into this game. There's only so many you can watch during the weekend. Tulane headed over to Tulsa. They beat the Golden Hurricanes 31-14. They were favored by 14 points. The Green Wave covered there. And it's a nice bounce back win for them as they got blown out by Ole Miss last week. Tulsa, unfortunately, don't continue their winning ways. They had a weeknight game in week 4 against Oklahoma State and won there in Stillwater. But here at home against a really, really good Green Wave team, yeah, they're definitely not going to get the job done. Hawaii headed on the road, and that's why we didn't have any crazy late night games there in Honolulu. They beat the Falcons of Air Force 44-35. It's one of the few games on this slide that we got wrong. We just didn't think Mike Alejandro was ready to take those steps yet because he's still, nursing that injury early on in the season. Actually, it was week 0 where he picked it up against Stanford. But it looks like he's 100% now. So going forward, we're going to be respecting the Rainbow Warriors there. As again, they beat Air Force 44-35. The final game on this slide, Tennessee versus Mississippi State. The Volunteers win 41-34 on the road, get their first SEC win, and hand Mississippi State their first loss of the season. Oh, and actually, if you are a fan of any of these programs, hit that thumbs up button. Let us know which one it is. As we continue into now the afternoon or late afternoon games, depending on where you are. Middle Tennessee State went down to Georgia to play Kennesaw State. The Owls win 24-16. Very glad we got that one right. We just didn't know that if Kennesaw State was going to come through. I know they beat... it's blanking on my head right now. We got that game wrong, if I'm not mistaken. I can't remember. Was it Jack's? No, it wasn't Jack State. It was like a Sunbelt team. Might have been... Shoot, I don't think I'm going to remember it. Regardless, we got it wrong against Kennesaw State last week. We knew the Raiders of Middle Tennessee have been pretty bad. And then on top of that, we saw the line going into the week. The Owls were favored there on Monday by -9 points. And then later down the week, they dropped down to 7.5 point favorites. Well, they covered. That's all that mattered. And then on top of that, they got it right for us. Old Dominion hosted Liberty and handed the Flames another L, as that's kind of the trend for Liberty, unfortunately, here in 2025. Old Dominion, also a great team. They were favored by 16 points. They don't cover, but they win by 2 possessions. So that's definitely good enough for us, as that's who we picked. Western Michigan. Oh, this was the other game that was against an FCS program. Regardless, they hosted Rhode Island. Rhode Island loses 47-14 against the Broncos there. Western Michigan off to a decent start there. They took North Texas to the wire, and I think that went to overtime. They beat Toledo last week. Now they get another win here. Obviously, it's an FCS program, but you got to build momentum going into the MAC. And we'll see and keep an eye on the Broncos as they look pretty decent here in 2025. Arizona over in Ames, Iowa to play the Cyclones. They get blown out 39-14. and Iowa State covers that 6.5 point line going into that. Virginia Tech headed over to Raleigh, North Carolina, played the Wolfpack and won 23-21. This was one of the few games where the favorite team by double digits didn't come through. North Carolina State beat Virginia a couple of weeks ago. Virginia, again, they just beat Florida State. So you're like, okay, North Carolina State's a decent team. They tend to, though, put themselves into some big holes that they usually have been able to dig themselves out of. They were not able to do that this upcoming weekend, or this past weekend, against the Hokies. They lose 23-21, and it was a bit of the same again. Them just not getting things right in the beginning of that game, and the Hokies kind of coasted off of that and held on to get their first ACC win and their second win overall in the season, as they're trying to bounce back again as they let go of their head coach a couple weeks ago. That was the second firing of the season. So I think Deshaun Foster was a little bit earlier that day. Jacksonville State they went down to Southern Miss and played the Golden Eagles and lose 42-25. I think I got that score wrong on there. It should be flipped. Regardless, Southern Miss did an excellent job in defending their home turf. It is what it is. I know that we have picked Jacksonville State on the road. They've come through for us. They don't do it here, unfortunately. But Southern Miss is an alright team. You know, they played Mississippi State pretty well in week 1. It's just been the last couple of weeks where we kind of lost faith. Probably should have kept it. Probably should have kept it with them this past weekend, because it would have kept us closer into the single digits in our loss column overall. Western Kentucky went over to Missouri State. They win 27-22. -5 point favorites. They cover there by the skin of their teeth. Hilltoppers continue to win. They had an earlier season loss to, I think it was a Mountain West school that I'm not remembering. Regardless, they only got one loss so far this season. As we continue to the last game, Memphis versus Florida Atlantic, 55-26. We get that game right, obviously, because Memphis is pretty good this season. And yeah, that is it for this slide. Let us know if any of these teams is your team, and also if it is one of these teams, hit that thumbs up button. As we have the final slide here to talk about, it's the Nightcap Games. Oregon headed over to Happy Valley to play Penn State in the whiteout game. We didn't go too many games this week against the grain. This was one of them. Penn State was favored by -3.5 points. Oregon comes through in the 6th ever meeting between the two, 30-24 there in overtime. The Ducks continue to win. Alabama headed over to Athens. It's one of the bigger games this week. We got wrong. 75th meeting between the two, and the second between Kirby Smart and Kalen DeBoer. And DeBoer is 2-0 now against Kirby Smart. UMass headed over to Columbia, Missouri. They lose to the Tigers 42-6. As I would continue through the games here on the final slide, Washington State headed over to Colorado State. This was one people putting money on these games. I'm like, what are these people thinking? Because Colorado State was favored by -4.5 points. So I was like, yeah, that's not going to happen. And then on top of that, Washington State beats them 20-3 on the road. It's like, I don't know what's going on there. Maybe it's Vegas thinking too highly of Colorado State. On top of that, the Rams, they just made a quarterback switch, and I don't think it was a very good quarterback switch. And we kind of see why they only got 3 points. And on top of that, the Cougars out of Pullman, they just have been having slow starts on offense and getting things going. It's really been the defense carrying them through games throughout this season. They did it this past week. and win again 20-3. One that we almost got right. I was very disappointed that San Jose State loses to Stanford 30-29. Last time the Spartans played the Cardinal, they won. Here, Stanford was only favored by 2 points. Actually looked like San Jose State was going to win this one there in Palo Alto. But again, the Cardinal come back and get that final. I think it was a touchdown. I don't think it was a field goal, to be quite honest with you. I think it was, what's the math on that? 23-29. They get that game-winning drive and then ultimately win 30-29 there. My Boise State Broncos. Yes, there's a reason why the room is blue, guys. You see my little piece of blue turf? Anyways, they win 47-14 against Appalachian State. Boise State just went off on defense, to be quite honest with you. I think there's 2 pick six minimum, if I can remember. I didn't get to rewatch this game before we went live here. I'm probably going to do it again after this because I got to do a preview for Boise State versus Notre Dame. Anyways, Boise State was favored by 16 points. They more than covered there at home. And they have a massive game in South Bend that I think a lot of people are doubting my Broncos. We'll talk about it a little bit more on Wednesday. Or maybe a couple days before that. It just really depends how much time I have. Anyways, South Carolina hosted Kentucky. They beat the Wildcats 35-13 as they have finally a bounce back win and get their first win in SEC play there. The Raging Cajun hosted Marshall and beat the Thundering Herd 54-51. This is one of the closest margins going into the weekend. The Raging Cajun of UL Lafayette were favored by 1.5 points. They beat Marshall in overtime again, 54-51. The second to last game, Louisiana Tech went down to El Paso, Texas to play the Miners. They win 30-11. But ultimately, the Miners won with the lid that they wore on that night. That was one of the coolest helmets I think I've seen so far this season. BYU headed over to Boulder, Colorado. This was the final game of the weekend. And the Provo Cougs get out alive as it was a bit of a slow start. Colorado also up 14-0. But good teams overcome, and that's what BYU did, and that's why they're ranked there at number 11. They're, I think, one of the best teams there also in the Big 12. 24-21. Cougs. That is it for all 53 games. If one of these teams is your team, hit that thumbs up button. Let us know which one of these teams that you root for there in the chat or in the comments down below. Again, this is the bye teams from this past weekend. 32 did not participate. They'll be getting back into action this upcoming weekend.